You've been sitting here long enough. Buy something else or get out. I understand.
Dad, her hands are shaking.
Ma'am, take this seat. The check's already covered.
Mr. Shaw, she hasn't ordered anything.
She's not ordering. She's joining us.
The manager of the Dogwood Diner had already asked the old woman to leave once. Nobody at the counter looked up from their coffee. It was the kind of November morning in Kalamazoo, Michigan, when the wind finds every gap in an old coat, and hers was older than most. 2 booths away, a man was counting the money in his wallet. $16.85, and 6 days until his next check. He did the arithmetic fathers do, quietly, with his face giving nothing away. Then he started cutting one breakfast into 3 portions. His name was Everett Shaw. For 14 years, he had kept cold rooms honest for a living. Commercial refrigeration, the trade of keeping food safe. Then the company took his job, his title, and his good name, and never told him the whole reason why. Everett didn't know yet that the old woman being asked to leave, the stranger in the worn black coat, owned that very company. And the old woman didn't know yet that Everett, the quiet father dividing his last full meal, was the one employee who had refused to lie for it. 5 days later, that company's board would sit down on a Monday morning. By the time the meeting ended, somebody in that building would have lost everything. It would not be him. The old woman had been sitting at table 7 for most of an hour. She had a menu in front of her and had not opened it. Her gray hair was pinned without much care. One hand trembled a little against the tabletop. Renee Sutter ran the floor at the Dogwood. She was not cruel by nature, only certain about who belonged in her dining room. And the woman at table 7 did not look like she did. Renee crossed over and lowered her voice. "Ma'am, these tables are for paying customers. I'll need you to order or step out." The woman nodded slowly, the way people nod when they have stopped arguing with the world. "I understand," she said. She began buttoning her coat with unsteady fingers. Everett Shaw was 41, a widowed single father. And for 9 months he had strung together delivery runs and small repair calls to keep a 2-bedroom apartment. His daughter Hazel was 8. She sat opposite him, a sage green scarf looped double at her throat, and she had been watching the old woman since the door first opened. "Dad," she whispered, "her hands are shaking." The woman rose to leave. Everett had spent 9 months learning what it feels like to walk out of a place while pretending it doesn't sting. He did not have money. He had a chair. "Ma'am," he pulled the empty seat toward their booth. "You can sit with us. The check's already covered." Renee stepped closer. "Mr. Shaw, she hasn't ordered anything." "She's not ordering," Everett said. "She's joining us." He asked a passing server for one more plate. Then he divided the skillet: eggs, sausage, potatoes, 2 slices of toast. A small share for Hazel, a smaller one for himself, and the rest onto the empty plate. When Hazel wasn't looking, he slid most of his potatoes onto her side. The old woman stared at the food for a long moment, the way you stare at something you had decided not to hope for. "You didn't have to do this," the old woman said. "I know," Everett answered. And that was the thing that made her sit down. Hazel studied her for a moment. Then she stood up in the booth, unwound the sage green wool from her own neck, and came around to the woman's side. "You can wear this for now," she said. "It works better than that coat." Everett went very still. His wife, Meredith, had knitted that scarf in the last winter of her life, 3 years ago, when Hazel was 5. It was the one thing his daughter never let the laundry basket have. He watched her lay it across a stranger's shoulders, and he did not stop her. The wool was still warm from the child's neck. The old woman touched the edge of it, and something behind her face gave way. "I'm Hazel," his daughter said. "That's my dad." "Harriet," the woman answered, barely. She looked over at table 7, the one she had been told to give up. "That was my son's table," she said. "Every birthday. He ordered the blueberry pancakes, told me they were terrible, and then finished mine." She folded her hands. "He died 12 days ago. Today he would have been 52. Everett didn't reach for a tidy sentence about reasons or better places. He had buried a wife. He knew there isn't one. He moved the napkins closer and let the quiet do its work. Hazel touched the woman's sleeve. "My mom died too." "How old were you?" 5. Hazel considered the menu. "Dad tries her pancake recipe every birthday. It never survives." Harriet laughed once, a small, cracked sound, the first in 12 days. She noticed the nearly bare plate in front of Everett and said he ought to eat something too. He said the coffee was plenty. Neither of them believed him, and neither said so. She picked up her fork. Then an electronic alarm went off behind the counter. The screen on the dessert cooler was flashing red. Renee walked over, pressed a button, and the sound stopped. The number did not change. 49 degrees. Everett turned in the booth. A bead of water slid from the lower door seam and gathered on the tile. Under the noise of the dining room, the compressor was cycling rough. On, off, on again, too fast. "Renee," he called, "that case needs looking at." She barely glanced over. "It does that. The door was open for the morning delivery." "It's been warm longer than a delivery. Your compressor keeps starting and quitting." "Doors don't cause that." Renee came over with her arms folded. Her eyes traveled down his faded work jacket, and her voice cooled. "And you can tell all that from a booth?" 14 years in commercial refrigeration. You learn what a machine sounds like when it's losing. "And now?" she asked, which was a different question underneath. These days he drove delivery routes and fixed washers in strangers' basements. He let the jabs sit and answered the useful part instead. Above 41 degrees, the health code stops calling that milk and starts calling it a risk. Check the middle of the case, not the door. "You're not authorized to touch our equipment." "I haven't left this booth." His voice stayed level. "An alarm isn't asking for anyone's opinion. It's asking somebody to check." A young server named Bree, newest on the floor, still wearing her training badge, took the thermometer from the drawer, sanitized the probe, and slid it into a milk carton on the center rack. They waited. 46. The room changed shape around that number. Everett stood but came no closer. Derry goes to the walk-in. Write down the time. Nothing gets served from that case until a licensed contractor clears it. Renee opened her mouth. The alarm went off again and made his argument for him. Bree started carrying cartons, and another server joined her without being asked. Harriet had watched all of it over the rim of her cup, wearing a child's scarf and an expression that was no longer numb. Then the door opened, and a silver-haired man in a dark wool coat came in from the cold, scanning the room like a man who had lost something valuable. The silver-haired man found what he was looking for at Everett's booth. "Mrs. Fairbanks." Relief took the stiffness out of him. "Forgive me, there was no parking on the block." His name was Stanley, and he had driven for the Fairbanks family for 22 years. He was also the first person all morning to say her name out loud. Renee froze with a coffee pot in her hand. By the register hung a black and white photograph, older than the paint around it. A young couple in front of a corner grocery with one awning. The brass plate underneath read, Harriet and Edwin Fairbanks, founders, Fairbanks Provisions. Fairbanks Provisions owned the Dogwood Diner. It owned the trucks in the lot and every paycheck in the building. The woman who had been asked to leave Table 7 had signed the founding papers of the company that set the price of the pancakes. "Mrs. Fairbanks," Renee's voice had gone thin, "I didn't recognize you." "No," Harriet said, without heat. "You recognized my coat." The dining room had gone very quiet. "I was protecting the tables," Renee tried. "From a tired old woman." Harriet touched the green wool at her throat. "How many others walked out of here because they looked like they couldn't pay?" Nobody offered an answer. What Harriet did next, she did quietly. She fired no one. She told Renee to preserve the morning's camera footage, the temperature log, the alarm history, and the maintenance records for that case. She thanked Bree by name for checking instead of assuming. Then she turned to the man who had fed her. Everett offered a plain business card. Everett Shaw. Appliance repair and refrigeration support. A phone number. Something about the name pulled at her, the way a loose thread pulls in a sweater. 12 days of grief had blurred everything. She let it go. "Thank you, Mr. Shaw," she said. "You fed me before you knew my name." "Everyone since my son died has known it first." Hazel looked up. "You were right there," she said, as if that settled the matter. Harriet held the scarf out to her. Hazel shook her head. "Keep it till you're home. Grandmas shouldn't wait in the cold." She had no grandmother, and Harriet had no grandchild, and neither of them corrected the math. By late afternoon, a licensed contractor had opened the case and found a failing start relay, the small switch whose whole job is waking the compressor. The unit had been drifting warm for close to 2 hours. Because the dairy had been moved fast and logged, the diner threw out almost nothing and served nothing it shouldn't have. The contractor put the savings near $4,800. He also found something less comfortable in the logbook. 3 alarms in the past month, each one silenced. Not one followed by a service call. Across town, a black sedan sat in front of a house with the curtains drawn. Harriet had barely left that house in 12 days. On the hall table inside lay her son's birthday cards, still sealed, because throwing them away was a thing she could not yet do. For 12 days, everyone who came through her door had brought paper. Sign this. Approve that. Transfer the authority. It's only a formality. The man at the diner had asked her for nothing, except whether she wanted toast. She took out her phone and called Dana Kwan, the company's general counsel in Grand Rapids, the lawyer whose job it was to know where every signature in Fairbanks Provisions lived. "I need you to look into someone for me." Quietly. "Who?" "Everett Shaw, refrigeration. I want his history with this company, if there is any." That evening, at Everett's apartment, Hazel was finishing homework at the kitchen table. "Was she really a billionaire?" she asked. "The picture said founders." "That's what the picture said." Hazel chewed her pencil, unbothered by wealth. "She still needed my scarf." Everett smiled for the first time that day. "Yes, she did." "If a stranger ever made room for you when you had nothing to offer back, tell them about it in the comments. Somebody reading needs to know that still happens." 2 hours after Harriet's call, Dana rang back. The lawyer's voice had changed register entirely. What Dana had found did not sound like a stranger at all. "Everett Shaw spent 14 years at Fairbanks Provisions," Dana said. "Cold storage division, senior systems technician, 2 promotions, not one safety mark against him." Harriet sat up straight in the dark car. "And?" "He didn't quit. We terminated him 9 months ago. The stated cause is insubordination. refusing to follow leadership's direction. What direction? There's one written warning from his final month. He wouldn't put his name on a commissioning report, the sign-off that says a new facility is safe to run. The word commissioning landed somewhere in Harriet's memory and struck something solid. Before the hospital, her son Nathaniel, he had run the company for 11 years, floor first and numbers second, the way his father had, mentioned a technician once. A dispute at a new cold storage site. He said the man may have paid for saying no to something. Then a nurse came in with a tray, and the sentence never got finished.
Who signed the dismissal? Harriet asked.
Dana paused. Miles Bancroft.
Miles was her sister's son.
47, beautifully dressed, holder of the acting title since Nathaniel's illness. After the funeral came the daily phone calls, always warm, always circling one subject, when she would hand over her voting authority. He called again that night. His concern came out polished, like something kept in a case. Aunt Harriet, I heard you went out today. You should have told security. And I heard a former employee attached himself to you at one of our diners. He shared his breakfast with me. He didn't know who I was. That's his account of it. A man with a sad story and a sweet child is a well-armed man. You're grieving. That is exactly what such people look for. His daughter lent me her scarf. Children make wonderful bait. Harriet closed her eyes. One question, Miles. The report he wouldn't sign. Was what he wrote true or false? A pause, one beat too long. It's more complicated than. That's a yes or no question, Miles. He was let go over conduct, not over what he wrote. I want his full file, she said. All of it. She ended the call. Everett was on his knees in an apartment basement, elbow deep in a broken washing machine, when his phone buzzed against the concrete. Mr. Shaw, this is Harriet Fairbanks. He rocked back on his heels, grease on his knuckles, 14 years of history on the line. Is the scarf home safe? It is. Nothing in my house is warmer. A breath. Mr. Shaw, you never mentioned you'd worked for my company. You were eating breakfast, he said. You'd had a hard enough morning without my file on the table. I want to hear it, all of it. My lawyer present, a recorder running, a neutral office. Nothing promised to you and nothing asked of you. Everett looked at the dead pump on the floor. 9 months he had steered around that company's name, around its trucks on the highway, around former coworkers in the hardware store, around the memory of packing 14 years into one cardboard box while a security guard watched him do it. He thought about the little box on every job application. Have you ever been terminated for cause? The way his pen hovered over it, every time, while the honest answer cost him another callback. He thought about Hazel last spring, asking quietly if they were going to move again. And if the truth embarrasses your company, he asked. Then it earned the embarrassment. 2 days later, on Friday, he put on the cleanest work shirt he owned, dropped Hazel at school with her lunch and her spelling list, and drove north to Grand Rapids with the radio off, rehearsing nothing. Dana Kwan's conference room held 3 people and 1 recorder. Dana with the file, Everett across from her, Harriet by the window. Dana set the ground rules. A fact-finding meeting, not a settlement, not a job interview. And Everett said that suited him fine. 14 years came out of the folder, 1 page at a time. Clean reviews. 2 promotions. Then the last project, the Ridgeline Cold Storage Hub, an $11 million build meant to carry the company's frozen line for a generation. Tell me about Ridgeline, Dana said. A subcontractor installed cheaper components than the design called for. Compressors, controls. Not junk, just not what was specified and not what was tested.
What did you recommend?
Install the specified equipment, or run the substitutes through a full 72-hour load test and let the numbers decide. Either way, I'd sign. And Mr. Bancroft? He pointed at the calendar. The site had a ribbon cutting on it. Everett's voice stayed flat. He told me I was dressing an engineering call-up as theater. I understood the deadline fine. I also understood whose name went on the certificate. Dana slid a scanned document across the table. This is the final commissioning report in your file. Everett read it once, then again, slower. When he looked up, something in his face had gone very still. I didn't write this conclusion. Explain. My conclusion said the numbers weren't there. Not enough data to certify. This version says the readings held within expected limits. Same header, same date, my name. He set the page down carefully, like something that might go off. Somebody kept my signature and swapped my answer. And after your refusal? Off the project that week. Dismissed 2 weeks later. I appealed. The answer came back that leadership had the authority to decide. Then Harriet spoke, for the first time in the room. What did it cost you? He looked away. That's not in the technical record. It's in the true one. So he told them. The health insurance that ended the month his daughter turned 8. The truck he sold to make rent. The duplex they left. The last home his wife ever lived in. For a smaller place across town. The industrial employers who read the word insubordination and quietly stopped calling. Does Hazel know why? Harriet asked. She knows I switched jobs. She's 8. I wasn't going to seat her front row at a fight between adults. Dana switched the recorder off. There's an archive I have to pull, she said. Before the hospital, Nathaniel asked legal to preserve records on contractor substitutions. He never got to finish that review. The archive surfaced on Saturday morning. Inside it was Everett's original test data, unaltered, with his real conclusion at the bottom of the last page. Site photographs of the substituted components, serial plates in frame, taken by Everett himself and stamped with dates. And an email from Miles Bancroft to the project office, sent 3 days before the dismissal. Soften the language. The board funds confidence, not a technician's nerves. Keep the date. Under those, in a folder Nathaniel himself had labeled, one handwritten note. The technical file and the dismissal file tell 2 different stories. Reopen this one. Harriet read it twice. Nathaniel's handwriting leaned right when he was tired, and this leaned right. He had been sick and running a company, and still some part of him had snagged on one technician's file and would not let it go. He ran out of road 9 steps short of the end. She sat with the note a long moment. 12 days she had been unable to open his birthday cards. This she could hold. This was not a goodbye. It was an instruction. She asked Dana to read her son's note aloud, once, just to hear it said in a room. Then she folded her glasses, and for that one morning, grief had a job to do. The board meets Monday to confirm Miles as chief executive, Dana said. They see every page of this first. Every page, Harriet agreed. She folded the scarf on her lap, once, precisely, the way she used to fold contracts. My son opened this review. It gets finished. Word of the archive reached Miles before the weekend was out. Companies have walls, and walls have ears, and acting chief executives own most of the ears. He did not call his aunt this time. He got in his car and drove to Kalamazoo instead. Not to the diner's dining room, but to its back office. Renee Sutter was already having the worst week of her working life. There was a written notice in her inbox about the treatment of a guest, the guest, and she had read it 11 times. She was ashamed, and she was frightened, and Miles Bancroft had learned long ago that those two things open most doors. Miles set a typed statement on her desk Saturday afternoon, friendly as a loan officer. Legal needs full context on the incident, he said. You were there. This helps them understand. Renee read it. The statement said that Everett Shaw had tampered with company equipment, broken up service, and exploited the disturbance to get close to Mrs. Fairbanks. She looked up. That's not what happened. He never touched the case. He told us to check it, and it was failing. He directed staff actions. Product was pulled. Product was saved. Miles tapped the page once. Renee, on Monday the board reviews judgment. Mine. Yours. A complete statement would show them the pressure you were under. He straightened his cuff. It would be a shame if your file had to speak for itself. On paper, it was not a threat. It did not have to be one. Give me until tomorrow, she said. You have until tomorrow. He left the statement on the desk. Renee sat with it for a long while after his car pulled away. On Sunday, when Dana Kwan called her in and asked what happened, Renee opened her bag, laid the unsigned statement on the table, and told the truth instead. He wanted Mr. Shaw to sound dangerous, she said. I judged one person by her coat this week. I'm done being useful that way. Dana ran the diner's footage that evening. It showed a man who never left his booth until the milk read 46. It showed a manager silencing an alarm. It showed an old woman in a child's scarf eating a breakfast that was freely given before anyone in that room knew her name. Monday, 9 o'clock. Monday's agenda had one item: confirming Miles Bancroft as chief executive. Dana Kwan opened with a motion to change it. The motion carried. Harriet sat at the center of the table. For the first time since the funeral, she was not in black. Over a gray suit that had signed 40 years of company Christmases, she wore a sage green knitted scarf. Dana presented in sequence, without adjectives, the raw test numbers, the rewritten conclusion over Everett's name. The email: the board funds confidence, not a technician's nerves. The warning and the dismissal, both dated after the refusal. Nathaniel's handwritten note. The diner footage. Renee's account of the Saturday visit, unsigned statement attached. Everett, invited for technical questions only, sat at the far end in the same clean work shirt. A board member named Lionel Hurst, the old freight man who had sold Edwin Fairbanks his first 2 trucks, leaned forward. Mr. Shaw, did the tests ever show that system was dangerous? No. Did they show it would hold under a full load? Also no. Then what was the sentence you wouldn't sign? One claiming the readings held steady. They didn't. They might have, after a real test. Nobody ran one. Miles took his moment. Context matters. The facility opened and runs today. Nothing was lost, nobody harmed. Mr. Shaw wasn't dismissed for a concern. He was dismissed for the manner of it. The manner, Lionel said, reading, appears to be a written appeal through your own process. Was the system retested? After adjustments, yes, Miles said. After Mr. Shaw was removed? The pause answered before Miles did. He turned on Everett instead. You held up an $11 million facility. The data held it up, Everett said. I just declined to say otherwise. You put your own judgment above this company. Signing only what's proven, Everett said quietly, was the job description. Then Miles tried the last door. Aunt Harriet, you met this man once, over breakfast, in the worst month of your life. You are letting one kind gesture steer a corporation. Harriet touched the scarf at her throat and looked at her nephew almost gently. "The evidence sat in this building before I ever met him," she said. "The breakfast is only the reason I finally read it." The board went into executive session. Everett waited alone in a side room. His phone buzzed once. "Hazel, from school. 3 words." Did they listen? He looked at the closed door and typed back, "They're listening now." 19 minutes later, Dana came in. The board had stripped Miles Bancroft of every executive power while an independent investigation ran. His confirmation was withdrawn. "And my file?" Everett asked. "Reclassified as disputed, pending review." She almost smiled. "It's not your name back. It's the beginning of it." The independent investigation took 7 weeks. It confirmed all of it. The altered report, the retaliation, the substitutions kept from the board, the pressure on a diner manager to sign a false account. The board dismissed Miles Bancroft for cause. He lost his succession bonus, his seat, and any road back. What remained of his contracts went to outside lawyers to unwind. Everett Shaw's record was corrected in writing. His objection? Valid. His dismissal? Retaliation. And the file now says so. A negotiated settlement returned his back pay, his benefits, and his retirement contributions, with interest. Then Harriet offered him a seat near the top of the company, and he said no. "Gratitude isn't a qualification," he told her. "You'd be giving me a chair. I'd rather earn one." So they did it properly, a 30-day independent assessment contract. He spent it auditing maintenance logs across 3 plants and defended his findings before a hiring panel with no Fairbanks on it. At the end, the panel offered him the position his own findings had argued for: Regional Maintenance Integrity Supervisor, the person whose signature means an alarm was checked, not silenced. It paid more than the job he had lost. It came with health insurance for Hazel, stable hours, and a name he could sign without flinching. He read the offer twice at the kitchen table, the way he read everything now. Then he signed it. Renee Sutter kept her job. Barely. A formal warning. Management duties suspended. Retraining on food safety and on people. Miles had pressured her about the statement. But nobody had made her judge a tired old woman by her coat. That part had been hers. She owned it, cooperated fully, and apologized without asking to be forgiven on a schedule. On Miles's last day, he and Everett passed in the lobby. Miles looked smaller without the title, the way some men do. "I thought you were out to embarrass me," he said. "I was out to keep my name off a lie," Everett said. "You put it there anyway." Miles nodded slowly, like a man doing arithmetic he had avoided for years, and walked out through doors his family's name was not on. Spring came. Harriet learned the science fair schedule. She sat in the gym while Hazel presented a cardboard cold storage truck and announced that warm milk was a public menace. She laughed louder than anyone there. One night, Harriet sat at their kitchen table, mending a loose stitch in the sage green scarf. Hazel leaned on her shoulder. "Grandma H, you missed one." Then the girl heard what she had just called her and looked up. "Is that okay?" Harriet's hands stopped. "It's more than okay," she said, and finished the row. At the dogwood, a small ledger appeared beside the register. Anyone could quietly add a breakfast to it. The company matched every page. The first name in it was Nathaniel's. The 3 of them still take table 7 on Sundays. Hazel always sets one extra place at the empty side of the booth. She says it's so there's a spot ready if somebody comes in cold. Last Sunday, somebody did. An old man in a thin coat at the register. Harriet lifted the extra plate and waved him over, wearing a scarf a little girl once handed to a stranger. Everett spent 14 years keeping things cold enough to last. What everyone remembers is how he kept people warm. If you stay for stories about quiet men who keep their names, subscribe. There are more of them than anybody ever counts.